staying successful in the pop music field is perhaps even more difficult than breaking in, which we've already discussed is pretty difficult. There are very few overnight wonders. There may suddenly appear on the scene a group who looks big, but in almost every case, they've been working at it for years. Creedence Clearwater took 10 years before they got a hit. How did they manage to stick it out that long?
It's pretty easy, and then again, it isn't. The most obvious thing is, well, we didn't make it, so we had nothing to break up over, you know. We couldn't say, hey, well, I'm going out on my own now because I'm a star, because nobody was, right? Which is probably the biggest reason why groups break up. But I think also it was so good in the first place, you know. It was like when you have an idea and it's really good. It's like we all weren't the only people we knew who played music. You know, like I'm fond of saying, when Doug and I met, I had to decide whether I would join his band or he would join mine. You know, and I chose that he would join my band. You know, and it was about, because was farther along. I had a name. You know, the Blue Velvets. Wow.
You cut Hanky Panky in '62?
Yeah, it was really weird. We cut it like 6 years ago. I did with 4 other musicians.
Do you want to call them that?
Oh, that's all right. Like,
as a matter of fact, we did it on a 1-track tape recorder in a radio studio, and the record bombed horribly. It was released on a small independent label. I don't even think it got played on the radio. And so 4 years later, in the spring of '66, a disc jockey in Pittsburgh, I don't even remember his name anyway.
Mad Mike
Metrovich.
from Boss Radio.
Picked up the record and played it, and of course nobody had ever heard it before, you know. He played it as an oldie but moldy or whatever. And 4 weeks later, the record was #1 in Pittsburgh. You know, I knew nothing about this, you know, because I'm back in Michigan.
We had a tough time getting a record company. We were different, and that our thing wasn't happening at the time, you know, because we were doing it. And we don't understand that, you know. Well, you're not folk and you're not rock, and well, we don't. Folk is dead, and you know, all that stuff.
From the groups that we've talked to, I've come to the conclusion that even if you have got talent, it's still a matter of time. Being able to stay in the business long enough to make the contacts, because in the music business, just knowing the people can mean a lot. For example, Vancouver's Poppy family. Terry Jacks met some of the fellas in the Beach Boys a few years ago, and a couple of months ago, he went south again to promote the Poppies.
Oh, we were sort of really down. Hollywood is such a down scene for an outsider. You can't get any appointments. Everybody says, you know, I'll stick around for a while, but they never give you anything definite. And we just decided to go and look at records that night, and Al was looking at records, too.
Yeah, I was trying to steal one. I didn't have any money at all. I was
you know,
broke.
it's really that way with everybody. It was that way with us, you know. I mean, as far as getting a record company, impossible.
Can't get past the cigars?
No, you can't. You can't do anything, you know.
What are your plans for the Poppy family, or what are the Poppy family's plans for you? Or?
I think we're going to...
Yeah, what are you going to do with us anyway?
We're thinking of recording, you know?
We're going to get together down in L.A. And record and make some records and just see what happens, you know.
Maybe that's what it takes to break in. We'll be back in 2 minutes with more. We were talking about magazines at the beginning of the show, and there have always been music magazines, but there's a new thing happening. This is one of them, and this is another one of them. This is I and Rolling Stone. These magazines aren't too much concerned with what the stars eat for breakfast and what color their eyes are, etc., etc. They're asking what they think. John Lennon, of course, said that the Beatles are more popular than Jesus, caused quite an uproar. Well, the editor of the Rolling Stone, Jan Wenner, says not only that, but they're more popular than the SDS. And if you'll think back, nobody ever asked Elvis Presley what he thought of anything. So why now? Has pop music become the forum for prophets and philosophers?
Talk about how the way how you feel about what's, for example, going on in your country, or what's going on, with young people in the world. You're a young man yourself still, so you're obviously involved in it. But and this song makes me think that you probably are interested in saying something about what's going on.
Yeah, well, I'm not a philosopher. You understand?
Right.
I mean, I don't. and I'm not a learned guy. I don't read the papers a lot, and I really don't keep up on top of it. All I know is that that we do need peace. And as far as the Vietnam thing, you know, anybody, you got to be a fool not to want peace, but you got to be a fool not to fight for something you love. And I just, as far as the Vietnam thing, I wish we would just get in and get out. Either do the job or don't do the job.
Do you tend to sort of throw in your political feelings and thoughts into records?
Well, that's not really a political sort of feeling, you know. It's a sort of more sort of a concern about humanity, because I mean, these people who live behind the Iron Curtain aren't really keen on living behind the Iron Curtain. I know this for a fact. I have lots of friends in Czechoslovakia, Hungary. I have friends in East Berlin. East Berlin is one of the most tragic cases, you know, that I know. I mean, there are people in West Germany, for instance, who don't know that West Berlin is an island in the middle of the Russian zone of Germany.
There are sort of three big groups behind the Iron Curtain, and they are the Rolling Stones, the Beatles, and the Spencer Davis Group. You're going to tour Czechoslovakia.
Right.
How do you feel about going back now?
Going to Czechoslovakia. If they asked me to play in Russia tomorrow, I'd go and play in Russia. Yeah. You know, I mean, the thing is, one thing that I must say, that the kids behind the Iron Curtain and the kids, like on both sides of the Iron Curtain, sort of the political differences exist in the heads of state and so on and so forth. I listened to sort of Back in the USSR on the first cut on the Beatles album, and at one stage they stop and they say back in the US, back in the US, back in the USSR, you know, like an equation of USA with USSR. And to me, you know, American imperialism is as bad as Russian imperialism, you know, it's the way I feel.
I enjoy the performing of the music, and I enjoy raking in the money, you know.
Right.
And
a little rake, a little gardener truck.
As far as message is concerned, I don't really care. As long as I feel that the music, I can warrant a good performance. I mean, the music can warrant a good performance from me. I'll do it. You know, I don't care whether it says to, you know, whatever, you know, or chew bubblegum music.
We did a record. Our first record was called Hush.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sure. We did that number for an LP. Actually, originally it was an LP track.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason we did the song was not because the song has any great political or emotional content,
Or intellectual, yeah.
or intellectual, but because it had an incredible sort of driving, hard rhythm. You know, which made it. You know, we felt that was part of us. Yeah. That was the rhythm and the kind of the whole rock side of us. It had a pulse, you know, which we felt was important to do. We did Kentucky Woman for the same reason.
Well, that's where music's going. I don't know. That's where it's going. Back to basic stuff. Sure, they've done everything they can with overdubs and strings and whatnot.
What about Philoso Rock? I hate these little terms. Yeah, but you know, do you try and throw in little things in your songs?
You always want to say something, whether it's, you know, as simple as
well,
I love you,
simple.
right? That, you know, that you dig a chick, or is that you want to go in and discuss the social problems and the inequities of society, you know.
If we don't.
Right. And a lot of things to talk about.
I mean, you don't even have to think about it or go, I'm gonna do something now that is the way I think, because, you know, that's just going to be the nature of what you do anyway, you know. It's going to be your way of applying it, or the way you work in the studio, you know.
They're not apolitical, but we just have never gotten into politics.
Well, like Revolution, for example.
No, we haven't gotten into that. We've sung mostly about another side of life, which is more, you know, nicer, lighter things, you know.
Yeah. Some people say that entertainment is sort of removed from politics, and should be, you know. Do you think that's right?
Yeah, I think whatever happens is right, really.
And
Some people, some entertainers want to get involved in it, and they really feel a certain way, so that's what they do, and, you know.
Like, it's not your thing to stand up and ask people to burn draft cards and that sort of thing.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
Well, you know, I'm a conscientious objector, you know.
Yeah,
I
I'm aware of that.
You know, I mean, I went through the whole scene, and I mean, I can understand them burning their cards, because if I didn't have money, you know, which is really that's a pretty strange thing, that I have to have bread to be able to fight that off, you know.
More on fantastic Philoso Rock in 1 minute.
Spencer's kind of an authority on the Beatles. You are, you know, you're a friend
Well,
of
I just
theirs.
know them, that they're ordinary people. But
Well, not very many people do.
Well,
And so let's talk a bit about the space they're in, because they seem to be leading things, or people think so.
Well, they're not really leading things, you know, sort of, the thing is people have strayed away from sort of what the Beatles are doing. The Beatles are just sort of like grooving, you know, and that's sort of the whole thing, you know, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, I got mad at George Harrison one time, and irate, because they have an aloofness and an attitude towards things that I don't go along with, which is, oh, well, sort of have to do your own thing, and all this and that, you know, and it's sort of, I think, the reason why England is economically, you know, in trouble. That kind of attitude can permeate a country. Maybe that's an example of that coming out. Anyway, but that song, that particular thesis of that song, I go along with, you see. I mean, using your mind and getting into something and changing it rather than destroying it. Because if you destroy something, you destroy a lot of good with a lot of bad.
Because it can be the greatest thing that ever happened is this youth revolution. I mean, it could either be the greatest thing that happened or the worst thing that could happen, depending on how it's guided.
You have a #1 record in England, which is, I understand, just being released in North America, called Albatross. Tell us a bit about your music and what you're trying to do.
Just trying to generally turn people on. Yeah.
Rock and roll music getting too esoterical lately, et cetera, et cetera.
I expect you'll draw your own conclusions, or have drawn your own conclusions about the effect of pop stars' philosophy on the world, and it's interesting to hear them talk rather than just play. Maybe. I don't know, maybe you find it dull sometimes, and sometimes it is dull, I think. However, music is feeling, and I think John Fogerty got that across, and feeling is at best hard to put into words in an interview in some crowded hotel room, and that's where it's at.